Good evening once again. Our top story, questions coming fast and furious, with our chief I-Team investigator demanding some answers from Bishop Malone today and other top leaders of the church here. My co-anchor, Ashley Rowe, live tonight from the Infant of Prague Church in Cheektowaga as we begin our extensive live team coverage on this story.
Hi, good evening to you, Keith. Yes, the bishop finally holding a news conference, answering questions from the media in an open forum at this press conference today. Charlie Specht being there. It was about an hour and 45 minutes long, and it wasn't just the bishop who spoke. We also heard from the diocese's attorneys, as well as a priest who heads up the disciplinary tribunal. It was a very tense hour and 45 minutes where, during the news conference, we heard of 36 additional priests accused of sexual abuse of a minor. The bishop says the list is a work in progress. An attorney for the diocese says there have been no reported incidents of abuse since 2002. We also heard that nearly 200 victims have come forward with allegations of abuse over the past year. Again, this new list of 36 names, in addition to the names that we have received over the past several months. Charlie, as I mentioned, a very tense news conference. A lot was said. Were a lot of answers given?
There were some answers given, but to be frank, they were long, complicated. There were a lot of half answers, half truths. We didn't get to hear from the bishop, as you said, until an hour into the news conference, when all the bishop's men seemed to be filibustering the news conference and preventing us from actually asking the questions we were told we were going to be able to ask. There was not a lot of specificity. There was talk about the cause of the sexual abuse crisis, the severity. You mentioned about no new allegations since 2002. That's not true. We've reported on multiple allegations since 2002. One against Father Yetter comes to mind. Currently, the district attorney is looking into that. And so we did get some answers, but not the kind of answers that are likely to satisfy the bishop's critics.
Charlie, you have been trying to get an in-person question and answer with the bishop for months now. You finally got to ask your questions. Let's listen in.
You have said here that you have never protected any priest accused of abusing a minor. Why did you leave Father Fabian Mariansky in ministry for more than 5 years, despite an allegation of statutory rape when the victim was 16 years old?
Father Mariansky's case was handled by one of my predecessors years before I came.
We're talking about you now.
I know that. Let me answer the question, please. Okay? And so Mariansky was sent off for evaluation and treatment, which at that time said he could be returned to ministry. We would never do that now. So I just wasn't aware of all this that had happened before I arrived.
But her case was in the black binder that Mr. Connors prepared for you. So did you not read that binder when you became bishop?
I read through it. A lot of the priests in there were already removed from ministry, as you know.
But you let him minister for 5 years. Why?
He was out for 5 years.
The whole time that you have been here as bishop, he has been in a church until the day the story was in the news. Why?
Because that's when we discovered, just recently this spring, when I discovered that we had this new letter from the young woman who was making the complaint.
Father Dennis Ryder is alleged to have molested not one, not two, but 3 minors. You suspended him, put him back into ministry earlier this year, before all of the victims were even interviewed. Why? I don't want to hear from Terry. I want to hear from you.
You're going to have to hear from my attorneys. I've been dealing with so many of these cases, Charlie, that the details in my weary brain, seriously, get mixed up. Can you comment on that?
Oh, no, I don't want to. Who runs this diocese? Is it you or is it Terry and Lawler?
It is I, but I rely heavily upon those who advise me on the details of these cases. Well, you can see here that every time we try asking the bishop, really nailing down into specifics, he turns around to the committee of men and women around him to see if they can answer it for him. One of his attorneys said something to the effect of, well, there's been some bad decisions over the last couple months. We're not perfect. I did get a text message from a victim
reacting to that, this victim said, "These are not bad decisions, these are crimes. Why not call the police? They need to stop saying it's a bad decision. It makes it sound like, oh, we just made a mistake, forgive us." What about the children who have been abused that have not come forward? Because all the research suggests it usually takes 30 or 40 years for most people to say anything about sexual abuse. So the whole idea that there's no abuse occurring in the church today, that may be true, of course, but we probably won't know until 20 or 30 years from now.
You were getting text messages real time during that news conference from victims. What was the overall tone from those victims?
Extreme disappointment. This is probably the fourth news conference they've held since March, and it was kind of like people were expecting, let's ask some questions, let's hear some answers from the bishop, really nail down into specifics. Instead, what they got was an hour-long arcane presentation about the ins and outs of the church bureaucracy when it comes to the sexual abuse crisis. Then finally we were able to ask him some questions, but only a few before he was whisked away.